Welcome to week five of the Thrive Quilt Sew Along. This week we are all about sewing our rows. So we have already sewn all of our individual blocks. We've cut out our triangles. I'm going to put that back. And now we're going to sew our quilt into diagonal rows because this quilt is on point, which means that it's set on its point. So each block, instead of being sewn together horizontally and vertically like maybe you typically would, and maybe add some nice sashing, we're going to rotate that, 45 degrees? And put it on its point. So there are a couple ways you can do that. You can kind of batch sew. You can sew it in chunks and chain piece, or you can actually just go row by row. You could sew one row, finish it, sew another row, finish it. I do have one big tip for you though, and that's to lay out your entire quilt. Even if it's just for a minute for you to snap a photo on your phone, lay it on the floor. I have a design wall, and I'll link to a post where you can actually get this exact design wall. But if you can see it in its entirety, it's so much easier not to get it out of order. So, I mean, for the most part, it's, you know, the accent squares are up, the accent squares are down, up, down. But it's really easy to get one of those blocks flipped the wrong way. You sew it all together. All of a sudden, you're looking at the middle of your quilt and you have a block that's going the wrong direction, and it's like, why? So just lay it out if you can. Anyway, so what I do is I like to start in the corner. I'm going to show you how I sew these blocks together. So I'm going to start in the corner by sewing this corner piece, this corner setting triangle to this block. And then after I sew that, I'm going to sew these sides, and then I'm going to choose to batch sew. So some of these blocks are going to be sewn rectangle to rectangle, which is really nice and easy because you don't have to match any seams. However, other blocks, for example, this one right here, when I flip it right sides together, I'll bring it over to you. These seams right here are going to try to match. So there's some pinning involved, or glue basting if that's what you prefer. I have a blog post on that I'll also link to. I'm gonna pin because glue basting takes more time, and I like to go fast. So actually I have one of those units finished. Let me show you. So what I'm gonna end up doing, see this nice pretty thing? I'm gonna end up chain piecing all of my hard block units together just to get that out of the way. And then I'm gonna chain piece my easy block units to get that out of the way. And then I'm gonna sew them all together in rows. And because we have 1 week to sew all of our rows, as long as you get all your rows sewn, you're on track. So however you find it easiest, if this is your first time making the Thrive quilt, it's not unheard of to get confused and mixed up. I mean, I've made a lot of these quilts, and I still am like, wait, which way does it go? Which way does it go? And another thing I continually do is I reference the pattern with that chart showing which direction to iron or to press your seams. So if you look in the pattern, I have these nice little hot pink arrows that are saying this way, this way, this way, go this way. And it does make it easier. Unless you press your seams open, you can iron them certain directions so that when we are in the final week, week 6, and we're sewing all of our rows together, every row nests. The seams nest really, really nicely. So I'm gonna put this thing back right here. And when I get more into the close-up nuts and bolts of sewing these blocks together, I'll talk more about which direction and whatnot. But for the most part, pretty standard. I am gonna iron my seams out toward the side setting and the corner setting triangles. And then from there, I'm gonna go every other one. Oh, one of my blocks fell. So for example, with this row, this seam is going to face out toward this triangle, and then this seam is gonna go this way, and then this seam is gonna go this way, and then we're back to our corner, our side setting triangle, and it's gonna face out toward the triangle. That make any sense at all? All right, let's get down. I'll show you the aerial view so you can see how I'm pinning, how I'm sewing. Okay. So I have my block and my corner setting triangle. Now the first thing I want to do is make sure that this corner setting triangle is completely centered on my block. So it's a cute little house. So I take my corner setting triangle, I fold it in half, and I just give myself a little finger pressed crease right there in the center. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with my block. Finger press a crease right there. And I see right in the center is where these two are lining up. So I'm going to fold it right sides together. And I'm going to give myself at least one pen right in the center. Maybe I'll give myself a couple just because this is a bias edge. So I don't know if I have mentioned this in a video yet, is that with these triangles, you're gonna have at least one bias edge. With the corner setting triangles, this edge is on grain, and this one is on the bias. So that means it is gonna stretch. So whenever you're dealing with a stretchier edge, it's not a bad idea to add an extra pin or two. Now, can you see with this block, I have a light background, so that is what my corner setting triangle is. And my accent square is a pretty dark shade. So I have a little bit of this seam of the dark accent square that's kind of popping out. And if I were to just go ahead and iron it open, it would probably be fine, but I might see just a shadow, just a ghosting of those threads. And I don't really want that. So I'm just gonna really quickly just trim, well, you know what, I need to sharpen my scissors. Just trim that off. So that's gone. I know I'm not gonna see that, and now I'm totally safe to iron my seam toward the side setting triangle. So I have my 1/4 inch seam sewn. The seam is facing toward the corner setting triangle. I have these dog ears, and they're not even, but that's totally fine because it's all gonna get trimmed. But I'm not gonna trim it yet. I'm gonna do all of my trimming at the end. So don't worry about trimming as you go. There's gonna be enough wiggle room for you to trim later. I'm gonna flip right sides together on one side. Now this is my corner, so remember these are my side setting triangles. And you see how it's about a 1/4 inch hanging off? I'm gonna line up this corner right here. And I'm gonna pin, and then I'm gonna do the exact same thing on the other side once I sew it. Pin, well, you know, this will be out of the way, obviously. And I'll have my nice corner unit, which also happens to be my first row. So now we have 2 blocks that have seams that need to match. But that's okay, we're up for the task. They're gonna go together like this and make a really cool zigzag. So it's gonna look cool. The first step, right sides together, just like this. And as you can see, these seams are going the same direction. So we're not gonna get our nice easy nesting, but that's okay because I have a nice little trick. If you are okay with sewing over your pins, slowly, here's my trick. So I line up the seams just like this. I want to make sure the edges are lined up and the seams are lined up. I take my pin, and if the seam is facing toward the right, I start on the left and I lock those seams together by going in one side and out the other, just like that. So I'm gonna do it again on the other side. So I'm gonna take it just like this, and I'm going to line up that edge. And I'm going to lock it with my pin, just like this. And I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna have some really good success with that. So I'm gonna take it over to my machine and see what happens. But just remember, if you do not wanna sew over your pins, you're not gonna get the same accuracy if you take your pins out before sewing over them, because your fabric is potentially gonna shift at the very last minute. So if you don't want to sew over your pins, or if you're new to sewing, or if you've had a bad experience with sewing over pins, I get it, check out glue basting. It's wonderfully safe. It's a little bit more time consuming, but it's also very accurate. Not too bad. So I will state for everybody out there who is against sewing over pins, to get pretty close to perfect accuracy, I am very slowly sewing over my pins with my sewing machine. So if you are not comfortable with that, or if you are new to sewing, I recommend using glue. So read up on that tutorial of glue basting, and in the meantime, have some fun with it. You know, we're not aiming for perfection, we're just aiming for progress, right? So have some fun with it. If it's not exactly lined up, please don't rip it out. Just move on, see if you can do better next time. So we just pinned some blocks, we matched some seams, and we talked about possibly batch sewing those units. So let me show you just once again, if you're like, what do you mean batch sewing? How we can do that. So this is the unit we just created right here. And I went ahead and I sewed another unit right here. So this one is sewn together. So you can kind of see the pattern here. So I'm going to go across the zigzag, and I'm going to sew this unit, and boom, boom. That's it, just boom, boom. So there's about 4 right here in this zigzag if you're making the throw size quilt. The really great thing, once you wrap your mind around which direction to press your seams, if you're pressing them to the side and not open, is that each of these units is identical. So once I wrap my head around, okay, in this row, the seam is going to be pressing out toward my side setting triangle. So that means I'm going to press my seam this direction, towards this really cool lavender, face fabric that I have. So that means every single unit is going to be pressed this same direction. So I'm going to probably take all of that to my table. I'll pin it, I'll sew it, I'll press it, and then I'll lay it back up. And then I can go down here and I can pick up all of these units, and I can pin them, and I can sew them, and then I can put it back up, press them, yeah. So again, once you decide, okay, this unit right here, it's going to be facing this side setting triangle. So once again, I'm going to be facing my seam toward this pretty floral. So it's not as much of a mind melt figuring out the every other one. If you do this batch sewing and chain piecing, it makes it a little bit easier on the brain, makes it a little bit maybe more relaxing. You're not just constantly like, wait, up, down, up, down, up, down. Anyway, so, have fun with it. But again, if this is getting confusing to you, if you're sewing things incorrectly and you're getting frustrated, just go row by row by row. Because these rows are still the 45-degree angle. Even though I'm talking about sewing units across the zigzag, in week 5, we are sewing our 45-degree angle rows. So do it however you want, no wrong way, but don't get frustrated. If you have some like really long dog ears, if you have some points here that are just like kind of off, it's fine. It's totally fine. It just means you got to make another one. No, I'm kidding. But maybe, a lot of times you do something once and it's not your best, so maybe do it twice. This is such a fun fat quarter friendly quilt pattern that you can, you could make it a couple times if you want. And I promise the next time you make it, it'll be even better. I've made this now, I don't know, seven or 8 times. I don't know, maybe more. Anyway, okay, well, have fun with it. And if you have questions, you can always shoot me a comment on the blog or get on the Susie Quilts Patterns Facebook group. And, We'll get through it together.